Today's story is Anomaly Part 6, Blood Forest, by RandoCalrissian. The zombies surrounded them like sand on a beach shore. Arthur stared at them. He had a spear in his hand and a sword at his side. His spear was pointed out, ready for battle. "Something's not right," Arthur proclaimed, breathing heavily, as a cold bead of sweat slowly dripped down his forehead and onto his brow. "And what is that?" Minoc asked, staring to the creatures that stood only a mile away from them. "There's too many of them," Arthur replied, breathing heavily, pointing his spear toward the creatures. "There's never this many of them in one group." "It is as I said. They were drawn here by the noise and the chaos," Minoc said back to Arthur. "Let's hope your weapons are enough to stop them, then," Arthur said, looking to Minoc. "Yes, let us hope," Minoc repeated. With every step, the creatures grew closer and closer. Every single step the creatures took were heavy, like a loud battle drum. Arthur could hear their snarling gums and the grinding of their teeth as the creatures moved closer to their next meal. From behind him, he could hear the archers pull back on their bows. Every second felt like an eternity as the ensuing battle grew closer and closer. Arthur could see sweat drip from every soldier, could feel every leg shake, he could hear every heartbeat. When the creatures were about 100 feet away, someone yelled, "Hold!" He could hear the string of the bow quiver. He could feel the strain of the archers. Now, the creatures were around 75 feet out, and again he heard, "Hold!" Suddenly, the whole world went quiet. It was as if the entire world took a giant, deep breath, but it was only for a moment, as he heard from behind him, "Fire!" Arrows filled the air. It blotted out the sun. The creatures in the front line were untouched, but the creatures in the back were pierced from head to toe with arrows. Their numbers dwindled. However, they were still far greater than the number of the army that Arthur had put together. In a sudden moment, the front line of the creatures in Arthur's army collided. Arthur had seen these creatures consume human flesh, but what he had never seen is how brutal they actually were. He saw 3 of them grab one Phoenician by its limbs and rip it apart. The creatures were brutal and quick. Arthur knew if they kept fighting the creatures, there would be no victory. He ran to find Minoc, amazingly still alive. "Minoc!" Arthur shouted. "We have to order a retreat. There's too many of them." Minoc nodded. He turned around and ordered his men to retreat, to fall back. Then, before he retreated himself, he looked back to Arthur and said, "I hope you know what you're doing." "Trust me," Arthur said softly. As the Phoenicians retreated, Arthur pulled the sword from his hip and ran toward the creatures. There were thousands of them. As Arthur was running, he was able to pick up another sword from a deceased soldier. He jumped into a pile of them and started slaughtering them one by one. Rachel was retreating with the soldiers when she looked back and saw Arthur in the midst of all the creatures. She yelled, trying to go back to help him, but 2 Phoenicians grabbed her and pulled her back to the cave. Rachel sat in silence. Hours had passed since the retreat. It's been too long," Rachel said. "He should be back by now." "He gave a noble sacrifice," said Minoc. "No need to be frightened, no need to mourn. His sacrifice will earn him a place among the stars." "My father is many things, Minoc," Rachel replied, looking down as she fiddled with a knife in her hands. "Noble is not one of them." Just then, the stone that covered the cave swung open. A silhouette stood in the now illuminated tunnel. The silhouette slowly started to walk towards the cave. As it grew closer, it became more abundantly clear that it was Arthur. As he came into view, they all noticed that he was covered in thick, red blood. His clothes were tattered and scratches covered his body. "You're alive," Rachel said as he walked past her. He turned to look at her and nodded. He looked at Minoc and threw him his blood-stained sword and said, "We need to talk." Minoc took him to a place where their conversation could not be heard. "What do you need?" Minoc asked. "How the hell do you know who I am?" Arthur asked. His tone was abrupt and angry. I wasn't sure at first, said Minoc. But after seeing all the things that you're capable of, all the things that you can do, there is no denying it. Arthur looked up at him and stared. Minoc continued. Legends are told of you throughout the galaxy. I wouldn't be surprised if they're told throughout the universe. The man who cannot die. Do those legends tell what happened? What I did to get like this? Arthur asked. His words were sharp as he pointed to himself. I'm aware of the mistakes that you made, Minoc replied. But what you did here today, it outweighs all of that. Arthur simply nodded. When they had walked back to the rest of the group, Maria was awake and holding her head. I'm sorry, I just can't. You have nothing to apologize for, my dear, Minoc said, cutting her off. He rested his hand on her shoulder. You cannot control your senses. Not yet. What happened? Maria asked as she looked at Arthur. Why are you covered in blood? Zombies, Arthur simply replied. Thousands of them. And you fought them alone? She asked as her eyes widened. I didn't have a choice, Arthur replied. There's always a choice, Maria proclaimed. No, not always, Arthur reiterated. That's enough for now, Minoc said softly. The child needs to rest. She needs all of her strength. For what? Rachel asked, looking up at him as she was still sitting. The girl's transformation might not be fully complete, he said firmly. However, she has turned just enough to hear her queen's call, he proclaimed. You're suggesting we use her to find the queen? Rachel asked, standing up. Yes, Minoc said. And when she serves her usefulness, we dispose of her, Arthur chimed in. Dispose of her? Rachel asked in disgust. Kill her. Incinerate her. Drop her off the edge of a cliff. I don't care what we have to do, as long as she's dead, Arthur snapped back. You will do nothing of the sort, Minoc said, raising his voice. She is an abomination, Arthur said, turning his head towards Minoc. She's just a child, and she has just as much of a right to live as you do, Minoc said, walking closer to him. She's more of a monster now than she is human, and she will turn on us the first chance that she gets, Arthur said in frustration. We don't know what she's capable of. What if she had the power to create more hybrids just like her? Your people are on the brink of extinction. How are you supposed to defend against that? He said, getting in Minoc's face. If we believe that there's even a 1% chance that she's our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty, he said, breathing heavily. If you lay one finger on her, our alliance will be broken, Minoc said quietly, matching Arthur's frustration. And believe me, that will not prove to be a wise decision for you, he said, looking Arthur directly in the eyes. Fine. But if she tries anything, I will not hesitate to drive a wooden stake through her heart. Understood, said Minoc. Now, if you don't mind, let's get to the real business. You mentioned something about a blood forest, Rachel said, trying to break the tension. Yes, it's where the spore originated from. Our ancestors always said it was forbidden to go there, Minoc said, hanging his head low. And when you went, it unleashed hell, Arthur said, sitting down and looking at Minoc. Precisely, Minoc said. How do we find it? Rachel asked. It's 2 days south of here. You will not be able to miss it. Legends say it's so large you can see it from the heavens. Arthur stood back up in shock and walked over to Rachel. Rachel, pull up a 3D model of Jupiter now. She did as Arthur requested. The 3D model was slowly spinning. Arthur stared at it intensely, trying to soak in every detail. His eyes grew wide and he pointed to the 3D model and asked, Is that the blood forest? The part on the 3D model he pointed to was the giant red dot of Jupiter. So it is true, Minoc said in awe. You can see it from the heavens. Arthur and Rachel stared at each other in shock. Arthur looked back to Minoc and said, I don't think you quite understand what exactly we're dealing with here. My plan was to simply burn down the forest, but burning down this forest would be no easy task. This forest is the size of 3 Earths, Arthur said, pointing to the 3D map. Then my people are doomed, Minoc said, falling against the wall and accepting defeat. You were our last hope, he said, looking up at Arthur. Arthur knelt down to his level and simply stared at him for a moment. Look, I didn't say it was impossible. I said it wouldn't be easy, Arthur said quietly. I look into your people's eyes and I see fear. The fear of not knowing what tomorrow will bring. The fear of losing those they love to this creature. The fear of losing their souls. But I promise you, you and your people will live in that fear no longer. I will go to Blood Forest. I will rain hellfire on the creatures that have taken your world. And your people will remember this day as the last time they had to live in fear of tomorrow. Minoc looked up at him. He grabbed the arm that Arthur had offered him and stood back up. See? That it is, Minoc said. Arthur nodded. Rachel and Arthur gathered what they needed. Food, weapons, and anything they could carry. Before they left, Arthur looked at Minoc and said, The girl's coming with us. If you move her, she might die, said Minoc. And if we keep her here, she puts all of your people's lives in danger, Arthur proclaimed. Very well, said Minoc. He motioned to his men to give them the girl. Before she left, they gave her what looked like a clay jar with a lid. And what is this? Maria asked as she held it in her hand. Sterilized blood, Minoc replied. It will keep your strength up during the journey, but use it sparingly, he said to her. I will. Thank you, she said as she walked away. May God be with you. Arthur, Rachel, and Maria slowly made their way to the Blood Forest. The days were hot and long, with various different terrains throughout. Some were forests, others were long stretches of desert. They had been walking for 2 days straight with no rest whatsoever. Maria was tired and faint. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, she said, stumbling over herself. Rachel turned back around to comfort her. I know, sweetie, but it's not much further now, Rachel said, resting an arm on her shoulder. Here, I'll carry you the rest of the way. No, Arthur said abruptly. That won't be necessary. We camp here for the night, he said, taking off his hiking bag and putting it down on a log. The place they had stopped was a small wooded area. Why stop here of all places? Rachel asked, her voice filled with confusion. Because the Blood Forest is straight across from us, he said, pointing to an opening in the woods. Rachel looked in awe as she saw tall, blood-red trees with blood-red leaves and blood-red bushes surrounding it. Well, I see now why they call it the Blood Forest, Rachel said with a slight chuckle. Just then, all of the trees in the forest started to shake violently. However, the most unsettling part of all this was that there was no wind. No breeze to even speak of. Maria covered her ears as the noise to her was deafening. Why the hell is it doing that? Maria yelled. Arthur just simply looked at the Blood Forest and softly said, Because it's alive, and it knows that we're here to kill it. Well, there you go. There's Anomaly Part 6. That is the second to last part of this series. Pretty excited to see how this goes. Pretty excited to see how this gets wrapped up. Hopefully Rando gets that. And I know it'll be good. He's a fantastic author, and this whole series has been great, so really excited for that. All that said, friends, if you did enjoy this and would like more content like this and would like to see the finale, which happens, I believe, next week, you should probably go ahead and hit that sub button and the little belly bell icon next to it. And then you can check me out on the social medias, and you can also support the channel through Ko-fi and Patreon. I'm not going to make those funny. All of this optional, and every bit of it is amazingly appreciated, because you guys, all of you, are just amazing people, and I love every one of you, so that's how it goes. Alright, so I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. It's almost the weekend. Hope you're all doing well, and I hope to see you in the next video. But until then, sleep well.